Greetings. This is an instructional video on how to write an analysis paragraph. Sometimes we call it a results paragraph. It's just a paragraph. And how to write or construct a concluding paragraph. And sometimes it can be two paragraphs. So you should have a copy of this handout. If not, it is in Google Classroom. So the analysis is just a paragraph about your data. I often refer to it as your data are just numbers in a chart. Some people, when they look at a data table or graph, it doesn't make sense to them, and they would rather read it in words. So we do the graphical representation, and we also put it in a paragraph form for people to read if that's how they choose. So I'm just going to read this to you and explain it to you, okay? So you collected your raw data, you did multiple trials, and now you've got piles of raw data and you need to summarize it and talk about what it means and analyze it so that you can then use that to support your conclusion. So we're not interpreting the data when we talk about the analysis. We're just telling you what the data is. Okay? So, what we're going to do is we're going to summarize it and we're going to do some math. So when we summarize it, we're going to give the middle or the average. So when you go to your data table, you can talk about, you can tell me, oops, sorry, that's the video. You can tell me, I'm going to go to Google Sheets. Hold on for a minute. My computer is slow, really slow. So when you go to your data table, you can tell me, all right, when we tested the water to see when we tested water in Miracle-Gro to see which one grew the taller plant, the plant grew 0.5 centimeters on average for the water, and the plant grew 0.833 on average for the Miracle-Gro. So you can give me a sentence that says the average plant height for water was, the average plant height for Miracle-Gro was. So if you're doing evaporation and you're comparing light versus no light, you can say the average amount of evaporated when we had it in the light was, and the average amount of water that evaporated when there was no light was. So we can give a sentence or two about the average, okay? When we talk about the spread is the range. So if we look at the data on the data table, you're going to tell me the range of data, the smallest number to the biggest number. So that sentence could look like the range of plant height when we tested water was 0 growth to 1 centimeter of growth. You could say the range of data or the range of growth, plant height growth for Miracle-Gro was from 0, it didn't grow at all, to a growth of 2 centimeters. Okay? So you're going to tell me the average, okay? And then you're going to look at your trial data and you're going to tell me the smallest and then the largest, okay? I don't want just you to say the smallest number for the water was 0 and the smallest number for water was 1, or the highest number for water was 1. I need you to add what that means, okay? So the smallest plant growth for water was 0 and the tallest plant growth for water was 1 centimeter. So you do have to put descriptive words in there, okay? So, you can also add some other things like mode. Mode is the most common number. So if I have 3 trials and they're all 0, you could tell me there was no growth. Maybe you have 3 trials and 2 of the trials were 0. You could say the most common growth was 0. You'll get a mode easier when you have more trials for evaporation, okay, or for condensation, okay? So this is a little mathy, okay? If you take a look at this last paragraph here, it says the analysis is a short paragraph that comes after your data and graphs that discusses your data in words instead of a graph. Things you should address are in the data are averages, we just talked about it. Mode is the most common number, like if you see 1 3 times, okay? Range is the spread from smallest to biggest, and an outlier is a number that is weird. So let's say I had 8 trials and they were all like 1, 1.5, 2.5, and all of a sudden you get a 10. That number that is super large or super small is an outlier. Could you have made a mistake with that? Possibly, but I don't need to know that right now. So if you have a piece of data that doesn't fit in a range and is too big or too large, that's called an outlier. You can tell me, did your experiment go as planned? And don't say yes or no. Say, yeah, my experiment did go as planned, or no, I had a spill, or no, I thought the numbers were going to do this, and they actually did this. Okay? So you got to tell me, if you say yes, they did go as planned, tell me why yes. If you say no, they did not go as planned, then tell me that. Was your experiment performed the exact same way with the exact same steps every time? It's okay if you say no. It's okay if you say yes. Okay? If you say no, tell me why. If you say yes, tell me. Okay? Some of you, we did have to tweak as we went. You changed the plastic on your precipitation model. You changed the type of cups, maybe because we ran out. You changed condensation. We changed from doing one type of water bottle to testing 2 different types, or testing 2 different refrigerators because the first time we did it didn't work. Okay? Remember, gaining an understanding, gaining the understanding of unusual or unexpected results is not a scientific failure. Okay? What is a failure is not recognizing it. Okay? All right, and here's an example of a result paragraph for a different experiment. It's about batteries. And then here's another one about plants. So you can look at the 2 different paragraphs, or the 2 different examples. One has a really long paragraph with another sentence. One has 2 paragraphs. I really don't want anything more than this, okay? Each paragraph in here is like 2 sentences, and this might be 2 or 3 sentences, okay? So I'm looking for a paragraph. Conclusion is a paragraph. It is a good paragraph with at least 5 sentences or more, okay? The object is not to say I have 5 sentences, I'm done. The object is to make sure the paragraph is organized and logical, okay? All right, so let's talk conclusion. The conclusion is supposed to wrap up your whole experiment, so it briefly sums up what you learned, talks about any recommendations for the future, and answers the following questions. So the first sentence is usually a restatement of the purpose. The purpose of the experiment was to see how amounts of light affect evaporation. The purpose of this experiment was to see how water temperature affects precipitation amounts. Okay? So we're looking at the cause and effect. Refer back to your question, but turn it into a statement instead of a question. Okay? You're going to then sum up your results. Okay? What are your major findings? Okay? We found that most evaporation, or the greatest evaporation, happened in this condition, and the least amount of evaporation happened in this condition. Okay? Maybe you had 0 across the board. So you can say, well, we didn't have any results at all in this condition or this condition. Okay? So you're just a sentence or 2. So we've got 1 sentence for the first bullet point, 1 sentence, maybe 2 for the second bullet point. And then, was your hypothesis supported? Don't tell me yes or no and hit a period. You can say, yes, my hypothesis of blank, 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 blank was supported. Or no, my hypothesis that stated blank, 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 blank was not supported. You do need to somehow restate your hypothesis. Tell me, was it supported or not? Okay? If it was not supported, that's fine. It's not that you failed. Okay? I am not failing you on whether or not your experiment was successful. I am grading you on, are you attempting to answer all these questions? How could you improve your experiment? So evaluate and think about what you did. Did your experiment end up in different places each day? Were they moved? Did somebody spill? Did you have to change materials midway because we ran out or it wasn't working? Did you make some changes as you went instead of strictly adhering to your procedure? Okay? Did you have zeros across the board? If you did, think about how could you change that? Okay? So this is usually a sentence or two. And then the last sentence or two is, what could you study next? So maybe you studied how temperature affects precipitation. So temperature of water affects precipitation. Maybe next you would test the amount of light that shines and simulate sunny and cloudy days. Maybe in condensation, you're going to test the type of water bottles. Or you're going to test how cold the temperature. So you're going to test water bottles in the freezer versus the refrigerator. Okay? So this is kind of just a restate of all of this. Okay? And I gave you an example of a concluding paragraph. Notice that it's much more beefier than this. This has got 2 sentences, maybe 3 in it. This has got many more sentences. Okay? I'm going to suggest that when you get these written, your analysis and conclusion, you read them back to yourself out loud. Yes, out loud. Because you can hear where the commas and the periods need to be. You can hear if it makes sense. I would also give it to someone else whom you respect, who are good writers, and ask them for feedback. And if you're giving feedback, give them some good feedback. Not, it's okay. It's great. Tell them what they did specifically good. Tell them where they could work on. Okay? I also included a rubric in this particular Google Doc. You should also get a rubric when I get back to class, so you know exactly what I am looking for. When you go into your Google Slides, I have to get rid of this real quick because when you go into your Google Slides, you're going to find the slide that says analysis. And you're going to click in here and you're going to start typing. The font, I'm going to ask at a minimum be 11. I want you to make the font as big as you can to fit here. And as you know, as you type, it'll tell you if you have punctuation wrong, and it'll tell you if your spelling is correct. Spelling and punctuation does count in this assignment because it is a formal assignment. You can also go into your conclusion and click in here and start typing. Again, I would love it to be 11 at the minimum. If you can make the font bigger, that would be great. Okay? We will talk about actually what you learned. You're going to click in here, you're going to type your name, and you're going to tell me a sentence or two about what you learned about your process of the water cycle, and what you learned about doing an experiment. Okay? Each member of your team has to have something. If you want to make them different colors, you can. And the last thing we'll talk about is the model of the water cycle process, and I will do that in a different video.